Have you ever witnessed a woman standing still in the middle of a windy land, carrying a lifetime of rejection, only to hear a strange child look up and ask, "Can you be my mother?" Clara Dawson, a mail-order bride, abandoned again and again, thought she was destined to be forgotten. But fate led her to a lonely farmhouse where a widower and his young daughter live, and where dangerous secrets lurk around every door. In that moment, Clara had two choices: run away to protect herself, or stay to protect a child in need of family warmth. If it were you, what would you choose? Do you have the courage to love again, even though your heart has been broken? This is not just a love story. This is a story of people who have hurt and lost, but still choose to stand up. We invite you to embark on this heart-wrenching journey. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on stories that touch every wrinkle of your memory. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Montana horizon, turning the dust along the tracks into a soft amber haze. Dusty Creek Station was never a busy place, just a stretch of weathered planks, a tin roof shelter, and a hand-painted sign that creaked whenever the prairie wind brushed past. Travelers rarely lingered here. Most passed through on their way to bigger towns where futures felt clearer and the air carried less loneliness. Clara Dawson sat alone at the far end of the bench, her gloved hands folded neatly on her lap, her single worn suitcase resting by her boots. Everything she owned fit into that one case, 2 dresses, a mended shawl, 3 letters she could not forget, and a hope she wished she had learned to bury. The hem of her navy traveling skirt brushed the dusty floorboards each time a breeze rolled in from the open prairie behind her. She had been waiting for nearly an hour, and this time there had been no letter to say, "I changed my mind." No apology, no explanation, just silence. Again, the silence was always the same, polite, suffocating, and final. Clara straightened her back, forcing her breath to stay even. A woman of 38 had no business falling apart in public, even if her heart felt like a stitched quilt coming undone thread by thread. She had learned long ago that tears were luxuries, and luxuries didn't belong to women like her women who traveled across states hoping to be chosen, hoping someone somewhere believed they might make a home together. Her last letter had been from a man named Elias Whitmore, a widowed rancher from the outskirts of this small Montana settlement. He had written with care, every sentence steady, almost too steady, as if he were afraid his own feelings might spill over. His handwriting had a firmness that suggested a man who worked long days and spoke sparingly. He'd mentioned having a daughter, 7 years old, a quiet child. He'd said nothing more. That had been enough for Clara. She had written back, reminding him she wasn't young, nor beautiful by any measure the world cared about, nor wealthy. She had described herself as capable, gentle, patient, someone who understands loss. And he had replied with a single line that had stayed with her through every mile of the train ride: "A gentle soul is exactly what this house needs." But now the platform was empty, the sky growing pale, the wind colder, and Elias Whitmore was nowhere. Clara lowered her gaze to her suitcase, the brass latch catching the last light of day. She forced herself not to think the words forming in her mind. Not again, not a third time, but denial didn't always protect the heart. 2 men stood near the freight cart, murmuring in low voices. One of them, a broad-shouldered figure with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest, glanced at Clara with a kind of sympathy she had seen before. Sympathy was heavier than pity. Pity passed quickly. Sympathy lingered. Sheriff Grant Boone gave her a small nod, took a step as if he meant to speak, then stopped. He looked down the empty road leading away from the station. No rider, no wagon, no sign of a man who had promised to meet his bride. After a long silence, he cleared his throat and approached. "Miss Dawson." His voice was steady, the tone of a man who'd had to deliver hard truths more than once. "I'm Sheriff Boone. I believe you're here to meet Elias Whitmore." Clara rose to her feet, smoothing her skirt with practiced composure. "Yes, Sheriff. Is he delayed?" The sheriff hesitated. His eyes shifted away, toward the distant hills turning lavender in the fading light. "He's not coming. Ma'am." It wasn't the words that stung. It was the familiarity of them. Clara held her breath, and in the stillness, the pieces of her heart rearranged themselves into silence once again. a silence she knew too well. Grant Boone continued with a sigh. Elias, he's a good man, but he ain't been the same since his wife passed. Folks don't blame him for anything no more. But grief's a weight a man can't always carry right. I think he got spooked. Clara nodded, feeling neither anger nor surprise, only that old, familiar emptiness settling across her shoulders like an unwelcome shawl. I appreciate your honesty, Sheriff, she said gently. He tipped his hat, regret heavy in the gesture, then walked back toward the freight cart, leaving Clara alone with the long stretch of prairie wind. The chill deepened as the sun dipped beyond the ridge. Night came quickly in these parts. Clara sat again, fingers trembling despite her attempt to remain composed. She had traveled almost 500 miles by rail, slept in a narrow berth, clutched a letter she believed might finally change her life, and now she faced the same truth she had faced before. She was unchosen, unwanted, unnecessary. The thought pricked her eyes with heat she refused to let spill. She pressed her palms against her skirt, grounding herself in the feel of the worn fabric. The scent of sagebrush drifted from the open plains behind her, a scent she had never known but already understood. It smelled of endings and new beginnings, both too near to tell apart. A gentle tug at her sleeve made her start. Clara looked down. A little girl stood beside her, small, thin, her boots scuffed, her wool coat several winters too old. Brown hair fell in uneven curls around her pale face, and her eyes large, gray. Questioning looked up at Clara with a trembling sort of hope. The girl's voice was barely more than breath. Ma'am, please don't cry. Clara blinked, startled. Had she been crying? She touched her cheek, surprised to feel the faint trace of wetness. I'm all right, Clara whispered, though the lie felt fragile. The child's small hand tightened around Clara's sleeve. Are you Miss Dawson? Clara knelt slowly so their eyes met. Yes, dear, I'm Clara Dawson. The girl swallowed, looking over her shoulder as if afraid someone might overhear. Then she leaned closer, her voice quivering with a longing so raw it pierced straight through Clara's chest. Ma'am, can you? Her lower lip trembled, and she took a shaky breath. Can you be my mommy? The world around Clara blurred for a moment the creak of the sign, the clatter of the wind against the tin roof, the lingering warmth of sunset. All of it dissolved beneath the weight of that one whispered plea. The girl's small fingers clung to her sleeve with desperation no child should carry. Clara steadied her voice. Sweetheart, what's your name, Lily? The girl whispered. Lily Whitmore. Clara's breath caught. Whitmore, the name she had crossed states to meet, the name that had written her gentle, steady letters, the name of the man who had promised her a chance at a home. Lily looked toward the road again, fear etched in her posture. Daddy didn't come, she murmured. He said he was scared. Clara's heart twisted. Scared of what? Darling Lily's answer was barely a whisper. Scared you wouldn't stay. The wind stilled. For a moment, time itself seemed to listen. Clara placed a hand gently on the child's cheek, her voice softening in a way she hadn't expected. Oh, Lily, I came all this way because I hoped someone might want me. I didn't expect to find someone who needed me. Lily's eyes glistened. Then, you won't leave, Clara hesitated. She felt the weight of her own hurt the sting of repeated rejection, the humiliation of waiting alone on a platform again. But she also felt something else, something deeper, quieter, rising from the place inside her where hope had tried to survive. She couldn't speak yet. The words would come, but not now. Instead, she wrapped her gloved fingers gently around Lily's small hand, and the child leaned into her as if she had found the missing piece of her world. The prairie wind shifted, softer now, as though the land itself was holding its breath for what would come next. The wind carried a colder bite as dusk pulled its purple veil across Dusty Creek Station. Clara rose slowly from the bench, still holding Lily's small hand. The child stood close, as if afraid the distance of even one step might break whatever fragile thread had just formed between them. Clara brushed a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. Where is your father? Dear Lily hesitated. She looked toward the darkening road again, her eyes flickering with a guilt far too heavy for a child her age. Daddy wanted to come. He said he'd try. She swallowed. But when the time came, He didn't. It was spoken simply, with the honesty of a child who had learned to expect disappointment gently, the way one learns the seasons. Clara felt something shift inside her, a quiet stirring of both ache and tenderness. "Well," Clara said softly, "we cannot stay here all night." She straightened her skirt and lifted her suitcase. "Is there someone nearby who can take us to town?" Lily nodded, her grip tightening. "Miss Martha. She runs the boarding house. She knows Daddy. She said she'd watch for you, just in case." Clara almost smiled. Even in the loneliest corners of the West, kindness still found its way through the cracks. "Then let us find Miss Martha." The two started down the wooden steps of the platform. Gravel crunched beneath their boots as they walked toward the glow of a lantern swinging from a buggy waiting near the edge of the road. The lantern cast a warm, flickering circle of light that stood out against the gathering night. A stout woman in a wool coat waved when she saw them. Her hair, the color of frost on dry wheat, was pinned in a tidy coil. "You must be Miss Dawson," she called. "I'm Martha Nolan." Clara offered a weary nod. "I'm very grateful to you, Mrs. Nolan." Martha glanced down at Lily, then back to Clara with a knowing look that held both sympathy and something sterner. "And I see you found our little wanderer. Lily, sweetheart, you should not have run off alone." Lily lowered her head. I didn't want her to leave." Martha sighed, the kind of sigh that held experience rather than irritation. "Climb in, both of you. It's a cold evening for heartache." Clara helped Lily into the buggy, then settled beside her. As the horse started down the narrow road toward Dusty Creek, Clara could hear the night settling on the plains. The trees whispered with the touch of the wind, and the scent of pine grew stronger with each passing minute. Martha held the reins with practiced ease. "I reckon you've had a rough welcome, Miss Dawson." "I imagine it wasn't intentional," Clara said, though the bruise in her voice betrayed the strength she tried to show. "No," Martha replied gently. "Elias Whitmore is a good man. A bruised one, but not unkind." She paused before continuing. "He lost his wife in a winter storm 7 years ago. And the way it happened, well, some losses take the breath from a man, for longer than folks expect." Clara felt the weight of that. Not just the story, but the way Martha told it, with the softness of someone who had watched sorrow unfold from a distance too close to ignore. Lily rested her head on Clara's arm. Clara froze for a heartbeat, startled by the intimacy, but the small warmth pressed against her made it impossible to pull away. She let her arm relax. Lily gave a tiny sigh of relief. The buggy rolled past the town's quiet storefronts, the smithy, the general store, the small chapel, all tucked in a line like weary travelers leaning on each other. Lanterns glowed behind curtained windows, casting silhouettes that hinted at simple lives unfolding in simple ways. When the buggy stopped in front of Martha's boarding house, Clara stepped down carefully, lifting her suitcase with one hand while keeping her other hand free for Lily. The child immediately reached for it, as if she feared that letting go would undo everything. Inside, the boarding house was warm, lit by the orange glow of a stove. The scent of stew still lingered in the air. Martha showed Clara to a room upstairs. It was small but tidy, with a quilt folded neatly at the foot of the bed and a washstand near the window overlooking the street. Clara set her suitcase down. Lily climbed onto the edge of the bed, swinging her legs slightly, not speaking, only watching Clara with wide, anxious eyes. "Shouldn't you be home?" Clara asked gently. Lily fiddled with the ribbon on her dress. "Daddy's working. He said he'd come later when he felt brave enough. Brave enough." The words carried a fragile honesty, like a note written by someone who wanted to say more but could not. Clara sat beside her. "Did he know you were coming here alone?" "No, but I knew he was too scared to come for you." Lily blinked quickly. "I didn't want you to leave like the others did." "The others?" Clara drew a slow breath. "How many have come before me?" "2?" Lily's voice was barely audible. "They didn't stay long. Daddy says it was his fault. I think maybe it was mine too." Clara reached for her hand, holding it with a tenderness she did not have to think about. "It was not your fault." "Lily? Not ever." Lily nodded, but did not meet her eyes. The door opened slightly and Martha peeked in. "Everything all right. Miss Dawson." Clara gave a faint smile. "Yes." Thank you. Martha's expression softened. If you need anything, just call. I'll leave you two for a bit. When the door closed, Clara looked at Lily again. The child's shoulders slumped with the exhaustion of worry. Clara helped her lie down on the quilt, pulling a light blanket over her small frame. Are you going to go away tomorrow? Lily asked, her voice thick with drowsiness. Clara brushed a curl from her forehead. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Tonight we will rest. Tomorrow will come when it's ready. Lily closed her eyes, whispering, I want you to stay. Clara watched her breathing settle into a slow, steady rhythm. Alone in the quiet, Clara sat by the window. The moon was rising above the pine ridge, its pale light spilling across the rooftops. She pressed her fingertips together, fighting a swell of old fears that always returned at moments like this. 3 times she had come to meet a man who said he wanted her, and 3 times she had been left to gather her pride like scattered seeds on a lonely platform. But tonight felt different. Not easier, not kinder, just different. Because this time, a child had asked her to stay. A child who carried loneliness in her small shoulders the way Clara carried it in her chest. The room felt still. The town felt still. The entire world seemed to hold its breath around that single, unanswered question inside Clara's heart. Was she meant to stay in Dusty Creek, or was she only passing through another chapter of disappointment? Clara closed her eyes and felt a soft tug of hope. A hope she had learned to distrust, but also a hope she couldn't quite push aside. The night settled deeper around the boarding house, quiet and tender like a blanket drawn over a weary soul, and Clara sat in the silence that felt both frightening and strangely full. The morning came quietly to Dusty Creek, spreading a soft pale gold light across the rooftops and the narrow dirt road that wound through town. The air carried the scent of pine and cold earth, the kind of scent that reminded people that winter still lingered along the edges of spring. Inside Martha Nolan's boarding house, the day began with the muffled clatter of pots and the steady hum of early conversation drifting up from the dining room. At the same moment, Clara Dawson was washing her face in the small basin by the window. Another part of town stirred awake. It was a place farther from the warmth and talk of Dusty Creek, a place where the land stretched into quiet fields and a small ranch house sat pressed against the rising timberline. This was the home of Elias Whitmore, the man who had written Clara letters full of gentle restraint and then failed to appear for her. Inside that house, Elias stood at the stove, staring absently at the flames as though waiting for courage to rise from them. His hands rested on the edge of the iron surface, fingers dusted lightly with soot and cold from the dawn. Behind him, the kitchen table sat with 2 empty chairs and 1 tiny plate left unwashed from the night before. Sheriff Grant Boone stood near the doorway, arms crossed loosely, observing Elias with a patient weariness only old friends carried. You didn't go last night, Grant said softly. Martha told me Lily found Miss Dawson alone at the station. Elias lowered his head. I know. Grant stepped farther into the room, boots sounding across the floorboards. She's a long way from home. Elias, you invited her. You owed her at least a greeting. Elias swallowed hard. I meant to go. I saddled the horse, got halfway down the road. His voice cracked the slightest bit. But then I saw the station lights, and it felt like the ground disappeared under me. Grant nodded without judgment. It ain't easy, I know. But you can't keep living as though one loss is the end of every beginning. Elias closed his eyes as memories pressed against him. He saw the snowstorm, the shaking lantern light, his wife, Mary, pale as winter milk, insisting she could birth their child alone because she didn't want to trouble anyone. He had been caught between fear and disbelief, unable to force her to change her mind. In the end, the storm won, and he lost both the woman he loved and the parts of himself that knew how to start over. When he spoke, his voice was low and uneven. I'm not fit for another woman. Grant, I barely managed to be a father. You're doing more than you think, Grant replied, but you can't let that girl of yours carry your fears. She went to the station alone. That says plenty. Elias turned toward the window. Outside, the world looked washed clean, as though inviting him to step forward. He didn't move. Grant watched him for a moment before adding, Go see them. If not for yourself, then for Lily, and for Miss Dawson, who seems a patient soul. Elias remained still, his breath shallow. The sheriff said nothing more. He placed his hat back on his head, gave Elias' shoulder a quiet pat, and stepped out the door. When the house fell silent again, Elias finally exhaled. The weight in his chest grew heavier. He wiped his sleeve across his eyes, ashamed of the wetness he found there. Then he went to the sink, splashed cold water onto his face, and stared at his reflection in the dim mirror near the pantry. He barely recognized the man staring back. Later that morning, Clara sat in the boarding house dining room, her hands folded neatly around a cup of warm coffee. Lily ate beside her, picking at a biscuit while watching Clara constantly, as though afraid she might vanish like a dream if she looked away. Martha placed a plate of eggs in front of Clara. "You should eat something, dear. Long journeys drain more strength than we realize." "Thank you," Clara said, offering a faint smile. Lily looked up at Martha with wide eyes. "Is Daddy coming to get us?" Martha hesitated before answering. "He'll come when he's ready, sweetheart." Clara heard the sadness beneath the words. It struck her deeply. She studied Lily, the child's small shoulders hunched with quiet worry. Clara's heart ached in ways she hadn't prepared herself for. After breakfast, Clara walked with Lily through the main street. The town's simple rhythm surrounded them. A blacksmith hammered metal in slow, careful strikes. A shopkeeper swept dust from his doorway. Horses snorted softly from behind the livery barn. Dusty Creek carried an air of solitude, but it was not an unfriendly solitude. Instead, it felt like a place waiting to be known. Lily tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Do you like it here?" Clara looked up at the curve of mountains in the distance. "I think it's a place where people try very hard to be brave." Lily nodded quietly, as if she understood that bravery came in many shapes. She held her doll tighter and asked, "Will you meet Daddy today?" Clara hesitated. "If he wishes to talk, I will listen." Lily's expression brightened with something like hope. "I think he wants to. He just forgets how." Clara touched the girl's shoulder gently. "Then we will take one step at a time. Sometimes that's all a person can manage." By midday, Clara found herself standing outside the churchyard with Lily at her side. Snowmelt dripped from the roof in soft, hollow taps. The quiet settlement stretched around them like a watercolor left to dry. Clara breathed in the cool air, letting the stillness settle inside her. She wasn't sure whether she had come to Dusty Creek searching for a home, or merely searching for a place where she would not be turned away at first glance. But the thought of leaving already felt harder than she expected. As they walked back toward the boarding house, the crunch of hooves sounded behind them. Clara turned. Elias Whitmore sat on a chestnut horse near the hitching post. He looked worn, as though he had not slept, but there was something new in his eyes, something searching. Lily's breath caught. "Daddy." Elias dismounted slowly, his gaze shifting between his daughter and Clara. He removed his hat, holding it in both hands, a gesture that made him look older, softer, almost fragile. "Miss Dawson," he said, voice unsteady, "I owe you an apology." Clara stood very still. She could hear the wind through the pines behind the church, hear Lily's small heartbeat of anticipation beside her. Everything in the world felt suspended. Elias tried again. "I'm sorry I didn't come last night. I lost my nerve." Clara answered quietly. "Fear can do that to a person." Elias nodded, unable to meet her eyes for a moment. "I never meant to hurt you. I don't know how to start again." Clara could feel Lily watching both of them, her small hand trembling in Clara's. Clara drew a steady breath. "I'm not asking for anything, Elias, not a promise, not a future, only honesty." Elias looked up then, truly looked, and for the first time, Clara saw the grief behind the man, worn like an old coat he could not take off. "I'm trying," he said softly. Clara felt something shift inside her again, a gentle but undeniable tug toward compassion she had tried to restrain. She stepped closer, only a fraction of an inch, but enough for him to see she was not turning away. "We can begin with that," she whispered. Lily took her father's hand, then Clara's, joining the three of them in a small, fragile chain. The moment felt delicate, as though the air itself held its breath to keep from disturbing it. In that simple connection, Clara felt the faintest spark of something she had almost forgotten existed. Not certainty, not ease, Possibility? A beginning? Even if uncertain. The sun edged higher over Dusty Creek as they stood together, 3 souls trying to learn how to breathe again. The daylight had begun to dim by the time Clara and Lily returned to the boarding house. The faint orange glow from Martha Nolan's kitchen windows spilled across the porch, carrying the scent of simmering vegetables and fresh cornbread. It was the kind of scent that made a person pause outside the door for a heartbeat, hoping warmth might soften the chill lingering in their chest. Clara stepped inside, brushing the dust from her skirt. Lily followed quietly, still holding Clara's hand, though she no longer needed to. The child's silence was not empty the way some silence could be. It was a watchful silence, filled with hopes the girl did not know how to voice. Martha looked up from the stove, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're back just in time. I made a pot of stew that ought to chase the cold right out of your bones." Clara offered a soft smile. "Thank you, Martha. It smells lovely." Lily climbed onto one of the wooden chairs at the table, her legs too short to reach the floor. She swung them gently as she waited, her eyes following Clara's every move. Clara hung her shawl by the door, then took the seat beside the child. Martha ladled the stew into bowls, taking her time, as if giving Clara space to gather her thoughts. "I saw Elias riding back toward the ranch," she said. "Looks like the 3 of you had a conversation worth having." Clara folded her hands together. "We spoke. That is all I can say for now." Martha placed the bowls before them and gave Clara a look that was both kind and discerning. Sometimes speaking is more than enough for a beginning. Clara lowered her gaze. "I am not sure he is ready. I am not sure I am either." "Most folks aren't," Martha replied gently. "But readiness isn't what builds a home. Steady hearts do, even if they're a little battered." Clara let the warmth of the stew soak into her hands as she held the bowl. She felt the truth in Martha's words, but she also felt the old ache pressing in again, the ache of past disappointments that had shaped her in ways she rarely admitted. Lily reached for a spoonful of stew, but paused halfway, glancing at Clara as though asking silent permission. Clara nodded. Lily relaxed and began to eat. After a few quiet moments, Lily spoke. "Daddy wanted to say more. I could feel it." Clara looked at her with gentle curiosity. "What makes you think so? He kept looking at you the way he looks at the hills when he is about to say a prayer." Lily answered softly, "Like he is almost brave." Clara's breath caught. It was a simple observation, but it pierced her with a tenderness she did not expect. Martha chuckled quietly. "That child sees more truth than half the grown men in this town." Lily blushed and kept her eyes on her bowl. The 3 ate together, letting the room fill with the comforting sounds of cutlery and the low crackle of the fire. There was something soothing in the simplicity of it, something Clara had not realized she was longing for. A family meal, a small, ordinary moment shared with 2 people who needed gentle things. When they finished, Clara helped Martha clear the table. Lily stayed close, brushing crumbs from the wooden planks with careful little strokes. As Clara rinsed bowls at the basin, a thought weighed on her. She turned toward Martha. "Do the townsfolk speak much about Elias? I sense they hold back when I am near." Martha paused before answering. "They mean well, but yes, they talk. They talk because they remember the winter Mary died. She refused help. She stayed inside the house through the storm, even when she knew she shouldn't. Folks blame Elias for not forcing the door open sooner. He blames himself, too." Clara felt a pinch of sorrow for the man who had stood so stiffly in front of her that afternoon. "I can see he carries a heavy sorrow." Martha nodded. "He never asked for pity. He shut down instead. Lily was just a baby. And Dusty Creek? Well, sometimes small places can be harder on a person than big ones." Clara returned her attention to the basin, letting warm water wash over her fingers. She thought of Elias's voice as he had spoken earlier, low and cautious, every word heavy with uncertainty. And she thought of Lily's small hand reaching instinctively for her own. Later that evening, Clara went upstairs to her room. The hallway creaked beneath her steps, echoing faintly against the stillness of the house. Lily followed her, clutching her doll to her chest. "May I sit with you a little longer?" Lily asked. Clara smiled softly. "Of course, dear." They sat near the window, where the moonlight fell in pale ribbons across the floor. Lily leaned close, watching the stars appear one by one. Clara let the silence stretch comfortably around them, feeling the strange familiarity of sharing quiet with the child. Lily spoke in a whisper. "Do you think Daddy is afraid of me too?" Clara turned to her, taken aback. "Why would you think that? Sometimes he looks at me like he remembers something sad," Lily murmured. "Sometimes it feels like I remind him of what he lost." Clara stroked the girl's hair gently. "You remind him of love, Lily, even if love hurts him sometimes." Lily leaned into her side, accepting the words, though she did not fully understand them. A few minutes later, Martha called Lily to her own room to sleep. The girl left reluctantly, pausing at the doorway to whisper, "Please don't leave Dusty Creek yet." The door closed gently behind her. Clara remained by the window long after. Outside, the town lay quiet beneath the starlit sky. She could almost hear the steady rhythm of Dusty Creek breathing in the night. She felt the heaviness of her own thoughts drawing close. She had come all this way to meet a man who might offer her a place to belong. Yet now that she had stepped into this complicated tangle of heartache and hope, she was no longer certain of anything, except for one thing. She could not bear the thought of Lily waking tomorrow and finding her gone. Clara whispered to herself, "One day at a time." She repeated the words like a prayer, gentle and firm. In that moment, she felt the quiet strength she had spent years nurturing inside herself. It rose like a small flame, steady and patient, warming the cold corners of her soul. Outside, the wind brushed the pines along the ridge. The sound carried faintly through the shuttered window, a reminder that even the loneliest places could whisper comfort if one listened long enough. Clara folded her hands in her lap, letting the night settle around her. She felt tired, but no longer adrift. There were choices ahead, hard ones, and she did not know where they would lead. But for tonight, she allowed herself to rest. She allowed herself to be exactly where she was. Dusty Creek held its breath in the darkness. Clara breathed in slowly, then let the breath out, steady and sure. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, and she would meet it with quiet courage. Morning light crept slowly across Dusty Creek, brushing the worn rooftops with a thin wash of gold. Clara Dawson rose before most of the boarding house stirred. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped quietly to the window. The air outside carried the crispness of early spring. The pine-covered ridge stood tall in the distance, its dark silhouette softened by the morning haze. For a long moment, Clara allowed herself to breathe in the calm. She felt steadier than she had on her first night here. Though the questions inside her had not disappeared, they were simply quieter, settled like dust on an untouched shelf. Downstairs, Martha Nolan was already preparing breakfast. Clara could hear the soft clatter of dishes and the slow, rhythmic stir of a wooden spoon. When she stepped into the kitchen, Martha looked up with a kind smile. "You slept some, I hope," Martha said. "A little," Clara replied, "enough to feel less restless." Martha studied her with warm eyes. "That is a start." Lily appeared at the kitchen doorway moments later, hair tousled, cheeks flushed with sleep. When she saw Clara, the child hurried forward and hugged her waist without saying a word. Clara rested a gentle hand on Lily's back, feeling a tenderness stir inside her that she had not expected to take root so quickly. "Would you like to take a walk after breakfast?" Clara asked. Lily nodded eagerly. "Can we go toward the ranch? Daddy might see us." Martha paused mid-stir. Her expression softened. "He usually checks the grazing pasture in the mornings. If he sees Lily, he'll come." Clara hesitated. She needed quiet time to understand her own heart. Yet something inside urged her not to avoid the path that led toward Elias Whitmore. "We'll walk slow," Clara said. "The morning is too beautiful to waste." After breakfast, Clara and Lily stepped out into the cool air. The sky stretched wide and unbroken above them. Dusty Creek's small buildings fell away behind as they followed the dirt road leading toward the ranch. Lily skipped ahead a few steps, swinging her doll by its arm. Every now and then she glanced back to make sure Clara was still there. Clara watched the girl with quiet affection. There was an openness in Lily that touched something deep inside her, something that longed to be needed without conditions. Yet with each fondness that grew, Clara felt the familiar tug of caution. She had told herself never to build hopes too eagerly. Disappointment had a talent for arriving at her door uninvited. The road bent toward open land, revealing rolling fields that stretched to the pine trees gathering at the horizon. Far off, near the grazing fence, Clara saw a lone figure on horseback. The outline was unmistakably Elias. Lily spotted him the same moment. "Daddy." She took 2 steps forward, then stopped, uncertainty slowing her feet. Clara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You can call for him if you want," Clara said. Lily cupped her hands around her mouth. "Daddy." Elias turned immediately. He steered the horse toward them at a slow, careful trot, as if unsure how close he should come. When he reached them, he stopped a few paces away and dismounted with an unhurried movement. He looked at Lily first, then at Clara, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning." "Elias?" Clara answered, steady but cautious. Lily tugged at her father's sleeve. "We walked here to see you." Elias knelt so he was level with her. "I'm glad you did." He brushed a stray curl from her cheek. "You doing all right?" "Yes," Lily whispered. "Miss Dawson stayed." Elias's gaze shifted to Clara again, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "Thank you for keeping her close." Clara felt her throat tighten. "She keeps herself close. Elias, I am only following her lead." A faint, almost shy smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was the first smile she had seen from him. He straightened, dusting his hands against his trousers. "If you would like, I can show you both the ranch. It is nothing grand, but Lily loves the barn." Lily gasped as if she had been given a gift she had not dared ask for. "Can we go?" "Miss Dawson." Clara hesitated. The thought of stepping onto Elias's land carried a weight. It felt intimate, as though crossing into a chapter she was not yet certain she belonged to. But Lily looked at her with such hopeful anticipation that refusal felt like shutting a door too suddenly. "We can go," Clara said gently. The ranch house came into view as they walked. It was small, with weathered siding and a stone chimney rising from one side. The porch leaned slightly, but flowers grew in pots along the steps. Someone had cared for this place with the kind of devotion that did not need to be spoken aloud. Lily ran ahead toward the barn. "I will show her the goats." Elias walked beside Clara, hands in his pockets. The quiet between them felt different today, not strained, but careful, like 2 people learning the shape of new words. "I am grateful you are still here," Elias said. "I know I did not offer a strong beginning." Clara kept her eyes on the barn ahead. "I did not come expecting perfection, Elias, only honesty, and honesty is rarely tidy." He exhaled, a slow breath drawn from somewhere deep. "I am not good at speaking of the past. Whenever I try, I fail before the words leave my mouth." Clara glanced at him, sensing the shadows in his voice. "Sometimes silence speaks the ache more clearly." "I carry too much silence," Elias replied, "and I fear the wrong person may feel responsible for it." Clara's steps slowed. She understood what he meant. "Lily?" He nodded. "She watches me the way a child watches the weather. She guesses my moods. She tries to fix what she cannot name." Clara felt her heart tighten. "Children should not have to mend the sorrows of their parents." "I know." He looked toward Lily, who was now showing the goats her doll as though they were honored guests. "I try not to let her feel the burden, but some days the past feels louder than anything else." Clara touched the hem of her shawl, steadying herself before she spoke. "You cared for your wife deeply." "Yes," Elias whispered, "too deeply to accept losing her without losing pieces of myself." Clara did not speak right away. She let the truth settle in the quiet between them. After a moment, Elias straightened. "Lily told me she wishes you would stay." Clara felt a tremor of emotion move through her chest. "Lily wishes for many gentle things. I do not want to give her a hope that might dissolve." Elias looked at her again, earnest and uncertain. "I do not know what I am capable of offering. I only know that when you spoke yesterday, I felt something shift, something I have not let myself feel in years." Clara's breath caught. The confession was soft but honest, and it unsettled her in ways both delicate and undeniable. "Elias," she said quietly, "I am not asking for promises, nor expecting them, but if you want us to take a step toward understanding each other, then I am here, one step at a time. Elias lowered his gaze as though humbled. "One step," he murmured. "I can manage that." Lily ran back toward them, breathless with excitement. "Miss Dawson, the goat's like you already." She grabbed Clara's hand and tugged her playfully toward the barn. Clara laughed softly, her heart warming at the simple joy in Lily's face. When she turned back to Elias, he was watching her with a look she could not fully read, something cautious, something hopeful, something human. They stood in that tender, uncertain space as the wind brushed gently across the ranch, carrying the scent of pine and morning sun. It was not a promise. It was not a beginning wrapped neatly with certainty. It was simply a step, a small, quiet step towards something that might one day grow strong enough to hold all three of their hearts. The afternoon sun softened as it dipped toward the tops of the pine trees, casting long shadows across the Whitmore ranch. Clara Dawson followed Lily through the barn, the child's excited voice echoing against the wooden beams while Elias Whitmore lingered near the entrance, giving them space to explore. Lily showed her everything with the devotion of someone offering a treasured gift: the goats, the old milk pail stacked neatly near the wall, the horse stall where a gentle chestnut mare blinked at Clara with calm curiosity. Clara knelt to stroke the mare's neck, feeling the animal lean into her touch with surprising trust. "She likes you," Lily said proudly. Clara smiled. "She has a kind disposition." "She misses Daddy's wife," Lily added, her voice suddenly quiet. "Mama Mary used to brush her mane every evening." Clara's hand paused mid-motion. She didn't speak. She only listened, sensing the fragile thread of memory in the child's voice. Lily continued softly, as if revealing a secret she rarely allowed herself to share. Mama Mary sang while she brushed her. I don't remember her voice, but Daddy does. Sometimes he stops in the middle of something and looks like he's listening for her. Clara felt a tug in her chest. She brushed the mare's neck once more and stood slowly. "Thank you for telling me. Lily." The child nodded, then took Clara's hand to lead her back outside. Elias waited for them, leaning against the barn door frame. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes held the lingering ache of someone caught between the past and something he didn't dare imagine. Lily ran off toward the small pasture again, leaving Clara and Elias standing a short distance apart. The breeze brushed through the grass, carrying the scent of pine sap and warm earth. "She told you about Mary, I suppose," Elias said quietly. Clara met his gaze. She shared a memory, a tender one. Elias looked toward the pasture. "I should have prepared you. Lily speaks of Mary in pieces. She doesn't remember her clearly, but children feel the loss, even if they cannot name it." Clara folded her hands gently in front of her. "I understand loss." Elias studied her for a moment. His eyes softened. "I know you do." The silence between them was not empty. It settled like a soft blanket, warm and weighted with unspoken truths. Finally, Elias stepped back from the barn and motioned toward the house. "There's something I want to show you," he said. "Only if you're comfortable." Clara hesitated. Something in his tone held vulnerability, raw and unguarded. She nodded. "I can walk with you." Elias led her toward the ranch house. Lily remained near the fence, humming to herself while swinging her doll gently by the hand. The world felt unusually quiet, as though the ranch itself listened to every step Clara took. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, old books, and faint lavender. Clara noticed small details that spoke of quiet care. The boots neatly lined by the door, the well-worn coat hung on a single peg, the small carved bird perched on the mantel. Elias paused at the base of the staircase, as if gathering strength. "This way," he said softly. Clara followed him up the narrow stairs. The hallway was dim, lit only by a small window at the far end that washed the wooden walls in pale afternoon light. Elias stopped at the second door on the right. He rested his hand on the latch. His shoulders tensed, and Clara sensed how deeply this moment carved into him. "This was Mary's room," he murmured. "I never changed anything since the day she passed." Clara felt her breath still. Elias opened the door. The room was small and quiet, filled with the stillness of years that had slipped by without a single disturbance. A thin layer of dust covered the dresser. A shawl lay folded at the foot of the bed, untouched. A comb rested on the windowsill beside a small jar of dried flowers. The air held the faint scent of lavender though Clara could not tell if it lingered from the past or from the association Elias carried inside him. "I did not bring anyone here before," Elias said. "Not even Lily." Clara looked at him, startled. "Why show me?" Elias leaned against the doorframe, his expression strained with emotion. "Because if we try to understand each other, you should know what remains inside me. I cannot offer more than what is real, and part of me is still tied to this room." Clara stepped inside slowly, letting her eyes trace each piece of the past. It was a sacred kind of quiet, the kind that held a person's story with tenderness and sorrow. She approached the dresser and lightly brushed her fingertips across its edge. She sensed Elias watching her, waiting for judgment, he feared. "I do not ask you to forget her," Clara said gently. "Love does not vanish when someone is gone." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, as though steadied by her words. Clara continued, her voice soft and steady. "But love can make room, not by erasing what was, but by allowing something new to grow beside it." Elias exhaled long and slow. "I am afraid of that, afraid of betraying her memory." Clara turned to him fully. "Grief is not loyalty, Elias. It is longing. There is nothing disloyal in learning how to live again." His eyes glistened, though he blinked quickly, refusing to let emotion spill. He stepped into the room, standing beside her at the foot of the bed. "I did not know how to speak these things," he said. "You spoke them now," Clara replied, "and that matters." A soft sound from the hallway broke the stillness. Lily stood at the doorway, her doll tucked under her arm. She did not enter the room. She only watched, her face fragile with uncertainty. "Daddy," she whispered, "you never bring anyone in there." Elias went to her and knelt. "I know, sweetheart." Lily's voice trembled. "Are you sad?" Elias drew her close, holding her gently. "No, not sad, just remembering." Clara watched them, her heart tightening at the depth of tenderness Elias held for his daughter. She stepped back, giving them space. But Lily looked past her father and reached out toward Clara. "Miss Dawson," she said, "are you going to be part of our family?" Clara felt the question like a soft, sudden wind against her chest. She stepped closer, kneeling beside the pair. "That is not something I can decide today," Clara said quietly, "but I care for you, Lily, very much." Lily nodded, accepting the gentle truth with the simplicity of a child who trusted kindness when she felt it. Elias rose and offered Clara a grateful look, one filled with quiet respect. They left the room together, closing the door with a reverence that spoke of beginnings rather than endings. Downstairs, the house felt warmer than before, as if opening that long silent room had let a new current of air pass through its walls. Clara lingered near the doorway before stepping out into the golden light. Elias followed, stopping close enough for his words to reach her softly. "Thank you for seeing what I could not say," he murmured. Clara met his gaze, calm and unwavering. Grief does not shrink when ignored, but shared, it becomes gentler. He nodded, and for the first time, Clara sensed he might believe it. Lily ran ahead toward the pasture again, laughing as the chestnut mare lifted her head in greeting. Clara walked beside Elias in a quiet that felt different from before, no longer filled with distance, no longer fragile. A quiet made of two people carrying their truths side by side. The sun lowered behind the pine ridge, casting warm light across the ranch as they walked into the evening. It was not a promise. It was the opening of a door. The sky over Dusty Creek shifted as afternoon turned toward evening, gathering faint streaks of gray that hinted at a change in weather. Clara Dawson walked slowly beside Elias Whitmore and Lily Whitmore as they left the ranch house behind them. The air was cool and carried a hint of moisture, the kind that brushed the skin lightly, offering a quiet warning of rainfall on the horizon. Lily ran ahead on the path, pausing every few steps to check if Clara was still close. Her laughter drifted on the breeze, soft and sweet, unburdened by the shadows that had lingered in the house moments earlier. Clara watched her with a tenderness she did not bother to hide. Then she turned her gaze toward the pine ridge in the distance. The tops of the trees swayed gently, their dark outlines shifting like waves on a still ocean. Elias walked with deliberate calm, his hands in his pockets. His voice, when he finally spoke, felt almost hesitant. "I hope I did not overwhelm you by showing that room," Clara shook her head. It was not overwhelming. It was honest. She paused, choosing her words with care, and honesty is something I value deeply. Elias slowed his pace. I have not let anyone step into that space for a long time. I kept it the same because I could not bear the thought of losing what little remained of her. That is understandable, Clara replied softly. A room can hold memories the heart is not yet ready to lay down. A faint smile touched Elias's lips. I suppose so. They followed Lily toward a fallen log where wildflowers grew in small clusters, their purple petals trembling in the slight wind. Lily knelt to pick one carefully. She held it up to Clara, beaming. For you, Lily said. It matches your shawl. Clara accepted the flower with a gentle warmth. Thank you, dear. It is lovely. Lily's eyes sparkled. Maybe we can plant flowers at the ranch, so it feels less lonely. Elias looked startled at his daughter's words, but Clara spoke before he could respond. That sounds like a beautiful idea. Lily, she said, flowers bring comfort in ways we don't always expect. Lily twirled in place, hugging her doll tightly. Then we should plant some soon. The wind grew stronger, and Clara glanced toward the sky. We may have rain soon. Elias nodded. The clouds have been creeping in all day. Might be a short storm. The three walked back toward Dusty Creek, but before they reached the wooden fence near the pasture, Elias slowed to a stop. Clara turned to him, sensing something stirring beneath his quiet demeanor. Clara, he said, her name fragile on his tongue. There is something I should tell you, something I have not spoken aloud in years. Clara felt her heartbeat steady itself. You may tell me if you wish, and if you do not, I will not press. Elias looked at the ground, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. The night Mary died, it was not just the storm. She insisted on being alone during childbirth. I begged her to let me fetch help, but she refused. She feared the neighbors would judge her weakness. She feared the whispers more than the danger. Clara listened in stillness. Elias's voice tightened. I stood outside that door, hearing her struggle. I should have forced my way in. I should have broken it down, but I kept believing she would change her mind, until it was too late. Clara stepped closer, her voice steady but warm. Elias, you lived through a moment no person is prepared for. You made a choice based on love, not neglect. I failed her, he whispered. You loved her, Clara corrected. And sometimes love carries mistakes we can only understand in hindsight. It does not make you unworthy of healing. He held her gaze for a long moment, the air thick with vulnerability. Then he nodded slowly, as if accepting something within himself he had long resisted. Lily skipped back to them, unaware of the conversation's weight. Daddy, can Miss Dawson stay for supper? Clara looked at Elias, allowing him space to choose freely. Elias hesitated, not from reluctance, but from wanting to say it correctly. If Miss Dawson wishes to share a meal with us, I would be glad. Clara's answer came softly. Yes, I would like that. They continued walking, with Lily leading the way. When they reached the ranch house again, Elias opened the door for them, and Clara stepped inside. The warmth of the living space felt more welcoming now, less haunted than before. Elias lit a lamp on the table while Clara helped Lily wash her hands at the basin. The child chatted about goats and flowers and the imagined stories she created for her doll. Clara listened with quiet delight, appreciating the innocent world Lily carried with her. Elias prepared a simple meal of roasted potatoes and cornbread. Clara offered her help, but he shook his head gently. You are my guest, he said. Let me do this. Clara sat at the table while Lily set 3 mismatched plates. The scene felt ordinary, but to Clara, it held a depth she had not felt for years. The sounds were soft, comforting. The scrape of a chair, the clink of utensils, the steady breath of the house settling in the growing dusk. During supper, Lily talked between bites, her small hands gesturing animatedly. Clara smiled at her stories, while Elias watched them both with a quiet ease that Clara had not seen in him before. When the meal ended, Lily rested her head on Clara's arm with contentment. You feel warm, the child murmured. Clara stroked Lily's hair gently. You feel warm, too. Elias cleared the plates, his movements unhurried. When he returned to the table, he sat across from Clara, his expression thoughtful. "You bring peace into the room," he said quietly. "I had forgotten how that feels." Clara did not speak for a moment. She placed her hand on the table, not quite reaching his, but close enough that the gesture felt intentional. "Peace comes when people allow themselves to be seen," she replied. The room filled with a silence that felt tender rather than tense. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. The first drops of rain tapped against the roof. Lily blinked sleepily. "Daddy, can Miss Dawson stay until the storm stops?" Elias looked at Clara with a question in his eyes. Clara nodded. "Of course. Storms are easier to wait out together." As the rain grew steadier, Elias lit another lamp, filling the house with a soft glow. Lily curled onto Clara's lap, holding her doll close. Clara wrapped her arms gently around the child, feeling Lily melt into comfort. Elias stood nearby, watching them. The expression on his face was not dramatic, not sudden, not overwhelming. It was quiet awe, an awe that came from witnessing a tenderness he feared he would never see again in his home. Clara looked up at him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them that neither dared name. A small shift, a possibility, a breath of something new. Outside, the storm rolled on, but inside the ranch house, the air felt calm. Clara felt Lily's slow breathing against her chest and allowed herself to rest for a moment, just as Elias allowed himself to hope. The rain continued its gentle drumming, sealing them into a shared quiet that neither wished to break. The rain softened sometime after nightfall, settling into a gentle patter that wrapped the Whitmore ranch in a hush. Clara Dawson sat in the wooden rocking chair near the hearth. Lily Whitmore curled against her chest, sleeping soundly. The child's small breaths rose and fell with the rhythm of a dream untroubled by shadows. Her doll rested in the crook of her elbow, one threadbare foot dangling over Clara's arm. Elias Whitmore stood a few steps away, hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. He watched them with an expression that seemed to shift each time the lamplight flickered across his face. Grief lived in him still, but something gentler had begun to mix with it, softening the lines carved by years of silence. "Storm's letting up," Elias murmured. Clara nodded, her voice quiet so as not to disturb the sleeping child. "It sounds peaceful now. It's been a long while since the house felt like this," he said. "Not because of the storm, because of the company." Clara lowered her gaze, feeling a warmth rise in her chest she had not expected to feel so strongly. "It's a comfort to be here. Truly." Elias looked toward the window, where the glass reflected the soft glow of the lamp. "I was afraid the silence would always haunt this place. Some nights it felt louder than the wind." "I do not hear silence here," Clara replied gently. "I hear memories, and the beginnings of something more alive." Her words caused a shift in his posture, as though she had touched a truth he had not dared acknowledge. After a moment, Elias stepped forward and lightly placed a folded blanket over Lily's legs. He did it with careful hands, the way someone handles fragile history. Clara watched him, sensing the years of tenderness that had been buried under sorrow. "This was Mary's chair," Elias said quietly. "She used to sit right where you are now, holding Lily when she was a baby. Sometimes she hummed soft songs, ones I never learned the tune of." Clara smoothed a hand over Lily's hair. "This is a good place for comfort." Elias lowered himself into the chair across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. The lamplight touched the edges of his weary eyes, revealing both strength and hesitancy. "I want to ask you something," he said, voice steady but cautious. "Something I've been trying to form into words since yesterday." Clara lifted her head. "Ask, Elias?" He exhaled slowly. "Are you staying in Dusty Creek because you want to, or because Lily has taken to you so quickly?" Clara felt the question press against her thoughts. She adjusted her grip on the sleeping child, giving herself a moment before answering. "But when I arrived, I felt alone," she said softly. "Your absence at the station reminded me of disappointments I had endured before, but Lily changed that. She reached out with a courage I could not ignore." Elias looked down at his hands. "She is bold in the way only a child with a tender heart can be," Clara continued, her voice gentle but filled with quiet truth. "I am staying because of her, But not only her. This place. You. There is something here that feels unfinished. Something that draws me, even if I cannot yet describe it. Elias's eyes lifted to meet hers. In them was gratitude, relief, and a thread of longing he had hidden for years. "I'm glad you're here," he said simply. Before Clara could respond, Lily stirred faintly, shifting in Clara's arms. The child blinked open sleepy eyes and whispered, "Is the storm gone?" Clara brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Almost." Lily nodded and cuddled closer. "Good. I dreamed you stayed forever." Elias closed his eyes briefly at the child's innocent confession. When he opened them again, his gaze met Clara's with a vulnerability he no longer tried to mask. Clara pressed a soft kiss to Lily's forehead. Dreams can be very brave. Elias stood and walked to the kitchen area. "Let me make tea. It's late, and the night still carries a chill." Clara listened to the quiet sounds of him preparing the kettle, the clink of cups, the gentle scrape of a match. She felt the warmth of the house shift around her, as though the walls themselves welcomed her presence. When Elias returned with 2 steaming cups, Lily had drifted back into deeper sleep. Clara accepted her tea with a grateful murmur. They sipped in comfortable silence. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the wet grass. The world felt paused, suspended in a moment. Neither wished to break. After a time, Elias set his cup aside. "There is one more thing I want to share. If you are willing." Clara met his gaze. "I am listening." He walked to a drawer near the hearth and pulled out a small wooden box. Its surface was smooth with age. The grain of the wood darkened from years of handling. "This belonged to Mary," he said. "Inside are letters she wrote to Lily before she was born. She wanted to leave something, in case she ever couldn't speak her heart." Clara felt a pang of tenderness. "Elias, you don't have to show me this." "I want to," he replied softly, "because you speak to Lily the way Mary wished she could have. With patience, with gentleness, and with truth." Clara looked down at the box he held out. "It is not my place to read her letters," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but holding them, that might help you understand our world better. What Lily carries, what I carry." Clara placed her free hand on the box, touching it lightly. She did not open it. She didn't need to. "I understand more than you think," she said. Elias's shoulders eased, as though a weight inside him had shifted. Outside, the last raindrops fell from the porch roof in slow, even drips. Lily murmured something in her sleep and tightened her arms around Clara's waist. Clara held her close, feeling the child's warmth seep into her heart. Elias watched them, and for the first time since Clara had arrived in Dusty Creek, his eyes held a quiet kind of peace, a peace that looked like hope in its earliest form. The hours slipped by gently. Eventually, Clara rose to leave, careful not to wake Lily as she handed the child to Elias. Elias cradled his daughter with practiced tenderness. "I will carry her to bed," he said softly. Clara put on her shawl. "I will walk back before the rain returns." Elias stepped close enough for his voice to reach her like a warm breath. "Clara," he murmured, "thank you for tonight." She met his gaze, her own expression calm and sincere. "Tonight felt meaningful?" He nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Please be careful on the road." She gave a gentle smile. "I will." As she stepped out onto the porch, the wind brushed against her face. The clouds had parted enough to reveal a sliver of moonlight that guided her path home. Behind her, she heard the door close softly. Not like a separation, more like a promise that she would return. Clara walked toward the boarding house, each step steady and sure. Her heart was no longer guarded in the way it had been days ago. Something within her had begun to stir, something fragile, something hopeful. And though she did not name it, she carried it with her through the quiet night. The morning after the storm broke gently across Dusty Creek. Thin sunlight filtered through drifting mist, gathering in pale ribbons above the damp earth. Clara Dawson woke with the sound of raindrops slipping from the boarding house roof, falling in slow, measured taps against the window ledge. The world outside looked washed clean, softened by the kind of quiet that follows a night of weather. She rose carefully, smoothing her dress with steady hands. Her thoughts lingered on the warmth of the Whitmore house the night before, on Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, on Elias speaking truths he had locked away for years. And on the way, the air inside that home had shifted, as though a window had opened where one had long been closed. When Clara stepped downstairs, Martha Nolan was already at the stove, turning slices of cornbread on a griddle. The familiar scent filled the kitchen, warm and earthy. "You were out late," Martha said, glancing back with a knowing look but no judgment. Lily looked mighty comfortable when Elias carried her home. Clara felt a soft heat rise in her cheeks. "The storm kept me longer than I planned." Martha's expression softened. A gentle storm can bring folks closer than sunshine ever could. Clara sat at the table, folding her hands around a warm cup Martha placed before her. It was a meaningful evening. Meaningful sounds like a new beginning. Martha replied, "If you let it be." Clara did not answer. Her thoughts drifted to Elias's eyes the night before, the unguarded way he watched her hold his daughter, the quiet hope she sensed but dared not name. She felt a flicker of something inside her, delicate and cautious, a longing to belong, a longing to be seen. After breakfast, Clara stepped outside, pulling her shawl tighter against the lingering chill. The road beyond the boarding house glistened with shallow puddles that caught the reflection of the sky. She began walking toward the pine ridge, a place she had not yet explored but had always noticed from afar. The path wound gently upward, lined with wild shrubs touched by the morning's dampness. As she climbed, Clara breathed in the scent of pine needles warming in the early light. There was a peaceful solitude here, different from the empty quiet she had known before coming to Dusty Creek. This solitude felt alive, as though it invited reflection rather than sharpening loneliness. Halfway up the ridge, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. Clara turned to see Elias making his way toward her, one hand holding the reins of his horse and the other raised in greeting. "I hoped I'd find you before you walked too far," he said, slightly breathless. Clara offered a gentle smile. "I did not realize I was being sought." "You were," Elias replied, stopping a few steps away. "Lily woke asking where you were. I told her you might have come up this way." Clara softened. "How is she this morning?" "Bright as spring." His voice warmed slightly. "She asked if you would return today. She wanted to save a corner of the table for you." Clara let the words settle inside her. "She is a dear child." Elias nodded, then looked toward the trees. "Mind if I walk with you a bit?" Clara gestured toward the path. "You may." They moved side by side, the quiet between them familiar and easy. The air held the scent of damp bark and earth, and the wind wove gently through the tall branches above. After a while, Elias spoke softly. "I did not expect the house to feel different after one evening, but it did." Clara looked down at the ground, watching the scattered pine needles shift under her steps. Perhaps it was ready to feel different. Sometimes all a home needs is someone willing to listen. Elias gave a thoughtful exhale. "I listened to things I had ignored for a long time, things I didn't know how to face." Clara paused at a small clearing where sunlight broke through the canopy, touching the forest floor in warm patches. Grief changes shape when shared. Elias studied her face, as though searching for something beyond her words. "Clara, I find myself wanting to ask you to stay, but I do not know if that is fair or right, or even what you want." Her heart tightened at the quiet vulnerability in his voice. "I cannot answer that quickly," she said. "My path has been full of disappointment. My heart is cautious." Elias nodded, accepting her honesty without withdrawing. Cautious is better than broken. Clara breathed deeply, letting the crisp air clear her thoughts. "Elias, I stayed in Dusty Creek longer than I intended, not because I feared leaving, but because there is something here that feels unfinished. Something I want to understand." Elias's gaze softened. "Are you speaking of me?" Clara hesitated. "Of you, and of Lily, and of the quiet ache in that house that feels as though it is asking to be tended." He closed his eyes briefly. "I have lived with that ache for years." Clara stepped closer, her voice gentle. "And yet you carried it alone." Elias met her eyes, his voice barely above a breath. "Until now." The wind shifted, brushing through Clara's shawl. For a moment, The world felt suspended, as though the forest itself waited for her reply. But before Clara could speak, the distant sound of a sharp crack tore through the quiet. Elias stiffened instantly. "That's a branch snapping," he said. "Or a fence rail. Something heavy." Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Is it dangerous?" "Probably not," Elias said, though his tone carried concern. "But I need to check. The cattle sometimes push through old fencing." Clara nodded. "Go. I'll wait here." Elias hesitated, torn. "I do not want to leave you alone." "You won't be far," she assured him, "and I will stay on the path." He gave a short nod and mounted his horse quickly. "I'll return as soon as I can." As he rode off through the trees, Clara watched him disappear among the pines. The forest grew very still afterward, holding only the steady whisper of wind through branches. She sat on a fallen log, letting her thoughts swirl quietly around her. She remembered Elias's eyes when he asked if she was speaking of him, remembered Lily's arms around her, remembered the comfort of the Whitmore house, warm with lamplight. Clara closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in a long time. Belonging. Tentative. Fragile. But unmistakably real. Time passed softly around her. Then she heard footsteps again, lighter than Elias's had been. She looked up to find Lily hurrying toward her, breathless, cheeks flushed with worry. "Miss Dawson," Lily called. "Daddy said you were here. I wanted to come. I didn't want you to be alone." Clara rose quickly and knelt to the girl's level. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't have come up here without your father." "I know," Lily whispered, trembling slightly. "But when I woke again and saw Daddy riding off, I felt scared. I thought maybe you would leave." Clara pulled Lily into her arms, holding her with firm tenderness. "I am not going anywhere. Dear, not right now." Lily clung to her tightly. "Promise." Clara rested her cheek atop the girl's hair. "I promise I will stay until we understand everything that needs to be understood." Lily let out a shaky breath. "Good." Clara held her close as the wind rustled through the trees around them. She felt a stirring of responsibility, heavier than anything she had carried in years. It did not frighten her. It grounded her. Soon, the faint sound of hooves approached through the trees. Elias emerged into the clearing, relief flooding his expression when he saw them unharmed. Clara stood, Lily's hand still wrapped around her fingers. Elias dismounted quickly, worry etched across his features. "You're both safe," he breathed. Clara nodded. "We are." What she did not say was that something in her heart felt safer than it had in a long time. Elias looked between them with a tenderness he did not need to speak aloud. The storm had passed outside. Inside their hearts, a different storm was beginning to quiet. The walk back toward the ranch unfolded beneath a sky slowly clearing of mist. The clouds stretched thin, drifting like pale veils across the blue. Clara Dawson walked between Elias Whitmore and Lily Whitmore, their footsteps soft upon the damp path. The morning air was cool but gentle, carrying the faint scent of wet pine and freshly turned soil. Lily held Clara's hand with a firm grip, as if she feared that letting go might allow the world to shift again. Clara squeezed back lightly, offering reassurance without a single spoken word. Elias walked close, guiding his horse by the reins. The tension that had flickered through him earlier now faded into a quieter steadiness. Still, Clara could sense the questions lingering behind his thoughtful glances, questions caught between fear and hope. When they reached the ranch house, the sun peeked through the clouds, lighting the wooden structure with warm hues. The porch boards creaked gently under their weight. Clara paused, feeling a familiar mixture of apprehension and comfort wash over her. Elias opened the door for them. "Come in," he said softly. "I was going to start lunch once I returned from the ridge, but it seems I've gathered company sooner than expected." Clara stepped inside with a faint smile. Company can be helpful. Lily rushed ahead toward the dining table. "I'll set the plates," she announced proudly. Elias looked to Clara, his voice low. "If it is not too forward, will you stay to eat with us?" Clara lifted her eyes to meet his. "I would be glad to." Something unspoken passed between them then, a sense of gentle agreement, the kind built not from bold declarations, but from quiet understanding. While Elias prepared the meal, Clara helped Lily arrange the table. The child hummed softly, the tune uneven but sweet. She placed forks and spoons with great care, occasionally glancing up at Clara for approval. "You're doing wonderfully," Clara said, smoothing a wrinkle in the tablecloth. Lily beamed. "Daddy says a table feels different depending on who's sitting at it." Clara looked toward the kitchen, where Elias stirred a pot over the stove. "He's right," she murmured. When everything was ready, the three took their seats. Clara noticed how Elias hesitated before sitting, as though adjusting to the unfamiliar presence of someone who filled the empty spaces once left unoccupied. Lily bowed her head. "Can we say grace?" Elias looked surprised, but nodded. "If you'd like." Lily closed her eyes tightly, her hands folded neatly. Clara did the same. "Thank you for the food," Lily said softly. "And thank you for Miss Dawson. Please help Daddy smile more." Clara's breath caught. Elias cleared his throat, looking down at his plate with a tremor at the corner of his mouth. "Amen," he said quietly. They ate in a gentle rhythm. The meal was simple, but the atmosphere felt full. Lily chatted about the dream she had the night before, one where she and Clara built a house made of flowers. Elias listened with a softened expression. Clara watched the two of them with warmth blooming in her chest. As the conversation drifted, Clara noticed how Elias relaxed in her presence. His shoulders no longer sat as high, his voice steadier, as if shared meals were slowly weaving threads of comfort through the air. At one point, Lily stood and brought Clara a small folded piece of paper. "I made this while Daddy cooked." Clara unfolded it gently. The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands beneath a large sun. She recognized herself by the long dress and shawl. Lily's tiny form stood between her and Elias in the picture. Clara's eyes grew moist. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias watched her. His expression stricken with tenderness, he did not speak aloud. After lunch, Lily asked to go outside and check on the chickens. Elias gave her permission, but asked her to stay near the back garden. The child rushed out the door with her usual bounce, leaving Clara and Elias alone at the table. The quiet between them was not uncomfortable. It settled like soft dust in a sunlit room. Elias ran a hand through his hair. "Clara, I want to say something, though the words may come clumsily." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "Say whatever you feel needs saying." Elias drew a breath. "I want you to know that your presence here is not something I take lightly. I have realized how much space grief held in my home, in my heart. You stepped into that space with care, not force. And Lily," his voice faltered, "she depends on you already, more than I expected." Clara waited, sensing his internal struggle. "I do not want to burden you," Elias continued, "nor do I want you to think Lily's affection binds you to us. I know how it might look. I know you came here under circumstances that were uncertain and perhaps unfair." Clara spoke gently. "Elias, I feel no burden from Lily or from you." He looked at her with pain and hope mingled in equal measure. "Then tell me truly, what keeps you in Dusty Creek?" Clara looked down at her hands, choosing each word with sincerity. "I stayed because Lily reached for me when I felt invisible. I stayed because your home felt like a place that remembered how to breathe when someone listened. And I stayed because there is a part of me that has been silent for years, a part you both awakened." Elias leaned back slightly, absorbing her words. His eyes glistened with something unguarded. "Clara, I'm afraid to let someone into this house, afraid to trust my judgment again." Clara's voice softened further. "Fear is not weakness. It is a reminder that what you are protecting matters." Elias looked toward the doorway Lily had disappeared through. "She matters more than anything." "I know," Clara said, "and that is why your fear is not a wall. It is an open door you're learning to hold steady." Elias let out a long exhale, almost a shudder. "I want to move forward, but slowly, carefully, with honesty." Clara nodded. "I could not ask for more." Their eyes held for a moment, a quiet moment, a promising moment. Then the front door burst open and Lily hurried inside, clutching something in her hand. "Daddy," she called, breathless. "Miss Dawson, you have to come see." Elias rose instantly. "What is it?" Lily opened her small hand, revealing a handful of pale blue feathers. A bird's nest fell near the garden. "The babies are on the ground." Clara stood with concern. Are they hurt? I think so, Lily whispered. Elias grabbed his coat. Let's go. They stepped outside into the brightening afternoon. The sky had cleared fully now, leaving the land washed in calm hues. Behind the garden fence, scattered in the grass, lay a small nest and 3 trembling nestlings. Clara knelt beside Lily, her heart aching at the tiny creature's helplessness. Elias crouched next to them. We'll lift them gently, he said softly. We'll fix the nest best we can and tuck them somewhere safe. Lily watched with wide eyes. Will they live? Clara placed her hand over Lily's. We'll give them the chance they deserve. Together. The 3 of them worked with careful hands. Clara supported the tiny birds with soft cloth. Elias reshaped the nest. Lily gathered small twigs with quiet determination. It was delicate work, patient work, hopeful work. When it was done, the nestlings rested close together, breathing shallow but steady. Lily looked up at Clara, eyes shimmering. We saved them. Clara smiled gently. We helped them. Life will do the rest. Elias looked at Clara then, the tender look returning. You bring gentleness into storms, he murmured. Clara met his gaze with a still, warm calm. And you bring steadiness. Lily reached for both their hands, linking them unintentionally. All 3 stood in the quiet yard, connected by something small but unmistakably growing. Not yet love, but the beginning of it. The afternoon light mellowed into a soft gold as Clara Dawson, Elias Whitmore, and Lily Whitmore walked back toward the porch. The rescued nestlings rested securely in their rebuilt home, tucked among the branches of a low spruce where the wind could not reach them. Lily skipped ahead, humming a tune she had invented on the spot, her small voice sweet and airy. Clara lingered a few steps behind, her heart filled with a quiet fullness. Moments like this were simple, but there was something in their simplicity that stirred old longings she had long buried. Belonging had always felt distant, a luxury reserved for other women. Yet here, with this child and her father, belonging began to feel possible. Elias slowed his pace to walk beside her. His boots brushed through the grass with an unhurried rhythm. You are good with her, he said in a tone that carried gratitude rather than praise. Lily trusts you in a way she rarely trusts anyone. Clara folded her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Children sense truth faster than adults. She knows I care for her. Elias nodded, looking ahead to where Lily twirled near the porch. She also senses steadiness. She hasn't had much of that outside this ranch. Clara let his words settle in the space between them. You have given her stability. Not enough, Elias murmured. Not the kind that leaves a child feeling safe when the wind changes direction. Clara glanced at him, empathy warming her eyes. You've carried burdens alone, Elias. That kind of weight Slowdrip's exhaustion through every corner of the heart. His throat tightened. There were days I didn't know if I deserved to raise her. Days I wondered if she would have been better with someone stronger, someone who didn't break when Mary died. Clara stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. The gesture was restrained, respectful, yet resolute. Strength is not the absence of breaking, she said softly. It is what you do afterward. And Lily is thriving because of you, not in spite of you. Elias exhaled slowly, the air leaving his chest like a long-held breath finally released. Thank you, he whispered. The porch creaked as Lily rushed inside the house. Clara and Elias followed her in. The living room carried the warm scent of wood smoke and dried herbs. A soft breeze drifted through the cracked window, stirring the curtains gently. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug, arranging her doll and a small wooden horse as though preparing them for a conversation. Clara smiled and took a seat on the chair beside her. Elias disappeared briefly into the back room, returning with the small wooden box he had shown Clara the night before. But this time, he held something else in his hand, as well, a sealed envelope. Fragile with age, the edges yellowed. I found this tucked between Mary's letters, he said. It was addressed to the mail-order bride agency. It was written weeks before she passed. His voice grew quieter. I never opened it. Clara looked up at him, her eyes widening slightly. Why bring it to me? Because, Elias said, taking a hesitant seat, I think you understand things I've never been brave enough to face. He placed the envelope gently on the table between them. Lily, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned back on her hands and watched quietly. Clara brushed her fingers over the aged paper. Her touch was light, respectful. The ink on its surface had faded, but Mary's handwriting was graceful, steady. "You don't have to read it aloud," Elias added. "You can read it only to yourself if you'd prefer. I just need to know what she tried to say. For Lily's sake, and perhaps for mine." Clara nodded slowly. "I will read it." She lifted the envelope delicately and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. When she opened it, the paper trembled faintly in her hands. Her eyes traced the words, line by line, silence wrapping the room in a soft cloak. Mary's letter was brief, honest, worn with the weight of a woman in despair. Clara read it once, then again. Elias watched, trying not to search her face for clues. His jaw tensed, betraying his fear. Lily leaned against Clara's knee, as if seeking comfort without knowing why. Finally, Clara folded the letter and set it on her lap. She lifted her gaze, meeting Elias with a mixture of sorrow and steadiness. She wrote about loneliness, Clara said, a loneliness she didn't know how to share. She felt unworthy of being a mother. She feared she would disappoint the woman she used to be. Clara swallowed, her voice gentling. She wasn't asking for help from the agency. She was begging for forgiveness from herself. Elias stared down at his hands. "Did she blame me?" "No," Clara said firmly. "She blamed her silence. She wrote that she loved you, loved Lily, but she couldn't escape the feeling that she was failing both of you." Lily's small voice broke through the hush. "Did my mama love me?" Clara gathered Lily gently onto her lap. "She loved you deeply. She loved you so much that her fear clouded her judgment, but love was at the center of everything she wrote." Lily leaned her head against Clara's chest, comforted but subdued. Elias rubbed a hand over his beard, a tremor running through him. "All this time, I thought I failed her." Clara shook her head slowly. "You both suffered in silence. Neither of you knew how to reach through it. That is not failure. That is heartbreak." Elias closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something inside them had softened. He had carried guilt for years, but now it seemed to shift, loosening its grip on his spirit. Clara placed the folded letter gently in his hands. She wanted peace. Let her have it now. Elias held the letter against his chest, his breath unsteady. "I don't know how to let go." "By letting Lily feel love in this home," Clara said. "By allowing yourself the chance to feel it too." Silence filled the room again, this time not from sorrow, but from healing beginning to take shape. After a long moment, Elias looked at Clara with eyes clearer than she had ever seen. "Clara," he whispered, "stay a while longer. Please. I need time to understand all of this. Lily needs time, and I want to know what life feels like when someone like you is part of it." Clara felt her heart swell and tighten all at once. She brushed a hand over Lily's hair. "I will stay," she said softly, "not because of duty, but because I want to understand what is unfolding here." Lily's face lit up with joy, her small arms wrapping around Clara's waist. "I knew you'd stay," she whispered. "I knew it." Elias bowed his head, a mixture of relief and gratitude settling over him. Outside, the sky brightened as the last clouds of the previous storm drifted away, leaving the landscape washed in gentle light. Inside the Whitmore home, another kind of storm eased one that had lingered too long in the corners of their hearts. Clara felt it too, the quiet shift, the slow healing, the beginnings of a place she might call home. Not yet, but soon. The late afternoon in Dusty Creek gathered itself into a hush, as though the world wished to give the Whitmore home space to breathe after the letter's revelations. Clara Dawson stepped onto the porch for a moment of quiet, letting the cool air settle against her skin. The landscape before her shimmered softly, washed in amber light that stretched across the open fields. The silence felt alive, carrying with it the faint rustle of grass and the distant murmuring of cattle in the pasture. Behind her, through the open doorway, she could hear Lily Whitmore speaking softly to her doll, her voice threaded with the innocence of a child trying to feel safe again. Elias Whitmore was still seated at the table, the folded letter resting near his hand like a small, Fragile truth he finally had courage to face. Clara closed her eyes. She let the wind pass gently over her, as if brushing away the remnants of a heaviness she had carried since she first stepped off the train into Dusty Creek. A heaviness that was different now, softer, shared. After a quiet moment, she stepped back inside. Elias lifted his gaze to her, something unspoken settling between them. "Lily's calmer," Clara said softly. "She's speaking to her doll about how love can be confusing, but still real." Elias rubbed his hands along his knees, exhaling. "She sees more clearly than I do sometimes. She sees what she feels," Clara replied. "And she feels deeply." Elias looked down at the folded letter again. "I keep thinking about Mary's words, the loneliness she wrote about. I never imagined she carried so much fear." Clara took a few steps closer, the wooden floor creaking faintly beneath her boots. Fear can live quietly inside a person. Sometimes it grows in the places no one else can see. "I wish I had known," Elias whispered. "I wish I had reached for her more often, asked her what weighed on her heart." Clara's voice softened. "You loved her in the way you understood at the time. That kind of truth doesn't disappear just because pain follows." He nodded, though sorrow lingered in his eyes. "I don't want Lily to inherit that silence. I want her to grow in a home where she feels heard." Clara felt a tender ache in her chest. "You are already giving her that chance, and she is meeting you with all the openness she has." Lily padded into the room then, her small feet barely making sound on the floor. She looked at Clara with a timid expression. "Miss Dawson, can I sit with you for a bit?" Clara lowered herself onto the rug and opened her arms. Lily climbed into her lap, resting her head against Clara's chest. The closeness felt natural, like the quiet ritual of two souls finding comfort in each other's presence. Elias watched them with a reverence he did not hide. The sight struck something deep within him, a mixture of gratitude and longing. "Clara," he said softly, "there is something else I need to tell you." She looked up, her voice gentle. "What is it?" He hesitated, running a thumb along the edge of the table. "When I wrote for a mail-order bride, I did not do it out of desperation. I did it out of fear. Fear that Lily would grow up without a woman's warmth in her life. Fear that the house would stay hollow. Fear that I would fail her a second time." Clara listened without interruption. "I didn't know who would come." Elias continued. "I didn't know if the woman would be kind, or patient, or willing to see past the grief this land carries." He paused, his voice quieting. "But when you arrived, everything I feared became something I hoped for instead." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Elias, I'm not asking for an answer," he said gently. "I just needed you to know the truth, that your coming here feels less like a transaction and more like a second chance. For all of us." Claire breathed in slowly, the weight of his words settling deep within her. Lily lifted her head. "Miss Dawson," she whispered. "Yes, dear. Are you staying forever?" Clara stroked her hair tenderly. "Forever is a big word. Lily, but you'll stay for now." Lily pressed. Clara kissed the top of her head. "Yes, my sweet girl. I'll stay for now." The child brightened and snuggled deeper into Clara's arms. Elias watched with a quiet relief that softened his entire posture. As evening drew closer, Clara helped in the kitchen while Elias finished chores outside. Lily stayed nearby, stacking wooden blocks into uneven towers, occasionally looking up to ensure Clara was still there. While Clara washed a pan at the basin, a knock sounded at the front door. Lily ran to open it, but stopped short when she saw the tall figure standing on the porch. Sheriff Coleman, Dusty Creek's broad-shouldered lawman, tipped his hat politely. "Afternoon." "Lily." Your daddy around Elias stepped inside moments later, removing his gloves. "Coleman, everything all right?" The sheriff nodded, though his expression held a seriousness that made Clara look up with quiet concern. "That fence post that snapped near the ridge earlier. It wasn't the weather. Someone cut it. Clean through." Elias stiffened. "Cut it? Who would do that?" Coleman sighed. "I don't know yet, but with cattle wandering close to the gully, it could have cost you half the herd." Clara felt a ripple of unease. "Is there trouble nearby?" "There's always trouble somewhere," Coleman replied, "but this feels deliberate." Elias's jaw tightened. "I'll check the rest of the fence line in the morning. Just be careful, Coleman warned. Some folks don't take kindly to change, or to new faces. The sheriff's gaze flicked briefly toward Clara. It wasn't unkind, but it carried the weight of a warning. Clara held his stare with a calm, steady composure. I'm not here to cause harm. Coleman tipped his hat again. Never said you were, ma'am. After he left, the house grew quiet. Elias leaned against the door, his brows knitted with worry. Clara approached him slowly. Elias, does this have anything to do with me being here? He shook his head. No. This land has had its share of disputes over the years. Someone might be angry about boundaries or grazing rights. It's nothing you've done, but it affects you, Clara said. And Lily? Elias looked at her then, deeply. Nothing will touch either of you. I'll see to that. Clara felt a surge of warmth and fear swelling together. His protectiveness stirred emotions she had hoped to keep gently contained. Lily tugged at Clara's dress. Are we safe? Clara knelt and held her hands. Yes, dear. We are together. That matters most. Elias watched them, his heart caught between the ache of uncertainty and the hope of something worth fighting for. As night settled, Clara prepared to return to the boarding house, but Lily clung to her again. Miss Dawson, will you come back in the morning? Clara cupped her cheek. You will see me with the sunrise. Elias walked her to the porch. The air had cooled, the sky streaked with deepening hues of rose and violet. He spoke quietly. Clara, thank you for staying, even with trouble lingering at the edges. Clara lifted her chin slightly. Some things are worth staying for. He inhaled sharply, his voice roughened by emotion. I hope you feel that here. I do, Clara whispered. She stepped off the porch, her footsteps soft against the earth, carrying her back toward town. Elias watched until she disappeared down the road, the twilight folding gently around her. He whispered her name to the wind. Clara walked, her heart full yet heavy with questions. But beneath it all was a steady flame, a quiet courage she had not known she still possessed. The night deepened around her, but her path felt lit by something more than moonlight, something she was only beginning to understand. The moon had already climbed high when Clara Dawson reached the quiet streets of Dusty Creek. A faint breeze lifted the edge of her shawl as she approached the boarding house, her thoughts still tangled with the sheriff's warning. The lamps flickered inside the windows, giving the small building a glow that felt more like a whisper than a welcome. Martha Nolan was sitting in her rocking chair when Clara entered. The older woman looked up from her mending, her sharp eyes noticing every shift in Clara's expression. You look tired, Martha said gently, and thoughtful. That's a combination that weighs heavy on a person. Clara hung her shawl near the door. It's been an emotional day. Martha waited, not pressing, simply offering space. Clara took the seat beside her, feeling the weight of the evening settle across her shoulders. There was a letter, Clara began softly, from Mary Whitmore. Elias found it today. Martha's hand stilled. I see. It revealed pain she never voiced. Clara continued, a loneliness she buried so deeply she could not find her way out. Martha nodded slowly, her face softened by sorrow. There are wounds a woman learns to hide, even from those she loves most. Clara's voice trembled a little. Elias blamed himself for years, but Mary blamed her own silence. Martha sighed, setting aside her sewing. Grief rarely settles neatly. Sometimes it twists itself into guilt, and a person wears it like a second skin. Clara felt quiet, staring at the wooden floor that creaked softly beneath their chairs. And now someone has tampered with the Whitmore fence. Sheriff Coleman believes it was deliberate. Martha's brows drew together. Dusty Creek has always been peaceful, but there are folks who carry grudges like old scars. Elias said it's unrelated to me, Clara murmured, but I cannot help feeling I've stepped into currents deeper than I understand. Martha leaned forward, placing a warm hand on Clara's. Child, listen, this isn't about causing trouble. It's about finding where your heart steadies. And if that place happens to be beside Elias Whitmore and his girl, then you're exactly where you're meant to be. Clara let those words hold her for a moment. She realized how long it had been since someone spoke to her with such certainty. That kind of reassurance was its own form of courage. After bidding Martha good night, Clara climbed the stairs to her room. The small window looked toward the distant outline of the Whitmore ranch, a faint silhouette under the moonlight. She stood there for some time, feeling the pull of something strong and steady growing inside her. When she finally slept, her dreams carried soft echoes of Lily's laughter and Elias's voice, woven gently through the hush of wind across the fields. Morning came with a pale light that crept across her quilt. Clara rose with a sense of purpose. As she braided her hair, she noticed her hands did not tremble. Something in her heart had shifted overnight. She felt clearer, more grounded. On the walk toward the ranch, she carried a small basket filled with cornbread and dried apples. Martha had insisted on sending it with her. For Lily, Martha had said, winking, and maybe for Elias, if he behaves. Clara smiled at the memory as she followed the dirt path. The air smelled of sun-warmed grass and distant sagebrush. Birds perched atop fence posts, calling to each other with morning songs. But near the southern edge of the Whitmore property, Clara slowed. There, deep in the dirt, were faint tracks, footprints, not from Elias or the ranch hands, smaller, lighter, but purposeful. She crouched to study them. The prints led toward the old fence line, then back toward town. Whoever made them had walked close to the boundary where the post had been cut. Her pulse quickened, but she steadied herself. Fear was a luxury she could not indulge in right now. By the time she reached the ranch house, Elias was already outside, repairing part of the gate. He looked up when he saw her, surprise flickering into warmth. "You came early," he said. Clara lifted the basket slightly. "I brought something for breakfast." A smile touched his lips. "Lily will be thrilled." As if summoned, Lily burst out the front door a moment later, her hair tousled, her cheeks bright. "Miss Dawson," she cried, racing toward her. Clara knelt to embrace her. "Good morning, dear." "You came back," Lily said with relief, as if she had been holding her breath all night waiting. Clara kissed her forehead. "I promised I would." They entered the house while Elias finished his work outside. Clara helped Lily set the table and warmed the cornbread. The simple routine felt almost like a ritual, one that soothed the deeper currents stirring beneath the surface. When Elias came in, brushing dust from his sleeves, Clara noticed the tiredness in his eyes, a kind of sleepless worry. "You were up late?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Checking the rest of the fence? I needed to know if there were more weak spots." "And were there?" Clara asked. "Two?" Elias admitted. "Both cut." Clara felt Lily's small hand reach for hers under the table. She squeezed it. Elias's voice softened. "I don't want you to worry." "I am not worried," Clara said quietly. "But I am aware, and awareness is strength." Elias looked at her with a deepening respect. "You carry yourself with more courage than most." Clara shook her head. "Not courage, just truth." They ate in companionable silence. Afterward, Lily went to play outside with a small wooden wagon while Clara helped Elias clean the kitchen. As Clara dried the last plate, she turned to him, her expression steady. "Elias, I saw footprints near the southern edge of your land. They were small, but not a child's. Someone walked toward the fence and then back to town." Elias's face darkened with concern. "You're certain?" "Yes." He ran a hand along his jaw, thinking, "I'll speak to Coleman again. Whoever is doing this may be trying to pressure the ranch or test boundaries before something worse." Claire's voice softened. "I want to help. Elias, even if it's only by being here. You don't have to shoulder this alone." He stopped, turning fully to face her. The room seemed to still around them. "Clara," he said quietly, "the thought of you leaving now frightens me more than any fence dispute." Her breath caught. Elias took a step closer, his voice low. "I don't ask this lightly, but will you stay at the ranch for a time? At least until we know more? You would be safer here. And Lily?" His voice trembled. "She needs your presence." Clara held his gaze, her heartbeat grounding itself in a quiet certainty. "If you are asking this because of fear, then let us weigh it differently. But if you are asking from something deeper, then I am listening." Elias swallowed. "It is both. Clara, fear for your safety, and something deeper that I'm only beginning to understand." Clara felt warmth rise in her chest. A soft, slow warmth that steadied rather than overwhelmed. "I will stay," she said, "if it helps Lily feel secure, and if it helps you breathe easier." Elias nodded, exhaling shakily. "It does. It will." Lily burst back through the door, then, holding a flower she had plucked from near the barn. "Miss Dawson," she said, offering it proudly, "this one is for you, because you make the house feel brighter." Clara took the flower gently, her heart swelling. "Thank you. Lily, I promise to stay a little longer." The child wrapped her arms around Clara's waist with unquestioned devotion. Elias watched them, emotion tightening his throat. His eyes were full of something unspoken, something waiting. Outside, the wind stirred across the open fields. The world felt tender but unsettled, as though a shift loomed just beyond the horizon. But in the quiet heart of the Whitmore home, Clara found her place. Even as shadows gathered at the edge of the land, a deeper strength rooted itself within her. The afternoon sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Whitmore ranch. Clara Dawson stepped onto the porch with a small bundle of freshly washed linens in her arms. She inhaled the clean scent of cotton warmed by sunlight, letting the familiarity of the task settle her nerves. Helping around the ranch gave her a sense of calm she had not realized she needed. Lily Whitmore played near the barn with her wooden wagon, gently pushing it along worn paths in the dirt. Each time she turned, she checked for Clara, as though confirming that the woman she trusted had not vanished like so many soft things in a child's life. Elias Whitmore stood near the edge of the field, his posture tense as he examined a section of ground burned into a small, charred patch. Smoke no longer rose from it, but the blackened soil told its own story. A spark, a flame, a warning. Clara approached slowly, her voice steady. "When did you find this?" Elias straightened, rubbing his jaw in a slow, contemplative motion. "Just now. It must have happened during the night." Clara knelt and touched the edge of the burned grass. It crumbled beneath her fingers. "This wasn't an accident." Elias nodded. "No. Someone wants to unsettle us." Clara looked up, her eyes meeting his. "But why go after you? It could be jealousy," Elias said quietly, "or bitterness about old boundaries. Or maybe someone thinks the ranch should change hands." Clara's voice deepened with concern. "Whatever the reason, it feels deliberate." Elias exhaled long and slow. "That's what worries me." The fields around them swayed under a gentle breeze, but the air felt heavy. Clara sensed something shifting, some unseen tension winding itself tighter with each passing day. Lily's voice carried across the yard. "Daddy, Miss Dawson." Come see Clara and Elias exchanged a glance and walked back toward the barn. Lily stood by a wooden crate, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Look what I found," she said, holding out a small metal button. "It was by the fence." Elias took it carefully. His features darkened. "This belongs to Jed Turner." Clara recognized the name. One of the local ranchers. A man known for his short temper and long-held grudges. Lily tugged at Clara's dress. "Did he lose it?" Clara placed a gentle hand over the girl's. "Perhaps. But your father will look into it." Elias slipped the button into his pocket. "I'll speak to the sheriff tonight." Clara watched him carefully. A storm brewed beneath his calm exterior. She could feel it, a quiet tightening in his breath. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with a strange stillness. Clara helped Lily gather eggs from the chicken coop while Elias checked the remaining fence lines. By evening, the sky glowed crimson, spreading like a watercolor across the horizon. Inside the house, Clara prepared a small supper. The warmth of the kitchen soothed her. She could hear Lily humming softly in the next room, content in her own gentle world. But Clara's heart pulsed with a subtle unease. Elias entered, cleaner now, but still carrying the worry he tried to disguise. He washed his hands at the basin, the water splashing softly. "Dinner's ready," Clara said. He nodded gratefully. When they sat, Lily clasped their hands for grace, her small fingers squeezing Clara's as if anchoring herself to someone she trusted entirely. "Bless the food," Lily whispered. "Bless Daddy. Bless Miss Dawson. And bless the house so it isn't scared." Clara's breath hitched at the innocence of the prayer. Elias looked down, his jaw tightening as he swallowed emotion. They ate quietly. The simple food warmed their stomachs. but the house still carried the weight of unspoken concerns. When supper ended, Lily carried her plate to the basin, humming a tune Clara did not recognize. Elias watched her, then turned to Clara. "You've brought peace here," he said softly. "Even in the midst of this trouble?" Clara shook her head. "I've only brought company." "No," Elias said firmly. "You've brought presence, strength. Lily hasn't slept this soundly in months." Clara felt her heart warm. She deserves steadiness, and you've given it to her, he said. The quiet between them grew thick again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It waited, expectantly. Later, when Lily begged Clara to read her a bedtime story. Clara followed her to the small bedroom. The room still held Mary's touch, though softened now by time. Clara read gently, her voice calm and unhurried. Lily fell asleep halfway through the story, her small hand resting atop the quilt. As Clara rose from the bedside, Elias stood in the doorway, watching. His eyes carried a softness she had only glimpsed before. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara nodded, closing the book with care. "She is easy to love." Elias stepped closer, his voice low. "So are you." Clara's breath caught. "Elias." He stopped, and giving her space. "I won't ask more of you than you're ready to give, but I won't pretend I don't feel what's growing between us." Her pulse fluttered. She held his gaze, searching the quiet sincerity there. "I feel it too," she said, barely above a whisper. "But I am afraid of rushing into something that needs time." Elias nodded. "Then time is what we'll give it." A soft knock interrupted them. Clara turned. It was one of the hands from the neighboring ranch, a young man named Owen. He looked uneasy. "Mr. Whitmore," Owen said, keeping his hat in his hands. "I didn't want to wait. You should know. I saw Jed Turner riding near your property late last night, close to the ridge behind the old oak." Elias tensed. "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir," Owen said. "I didn't say anything earlier, but after what the sheriff told folks about your fence, I figured you needed to know." Elias nodded grimly. "Thank you." Owen tipped his hat politely to Clara before leaving. Clara turned to Elias, her voice firm. "This isn't random. Someone is trying to provoke you." "I know," he said through a slow exhale, "and I won't let Lily be hurt." Clara reached for his hand, squeezing once, a gesture not bold, but deeply intentional. "We'll face this, together." Elias tightened his fingers around hers briefly before letting go. "I'm going to see Coleman. Lock the doors behind me." Clara nodded. "Be careful." He stepped out into the night, the door closing softly behind him. Clara looked toward Lily's room, hearing the child's gentle breathing. Then she moved to the window, watching Elias disappear into the darkness. The wind picked up, brushing against the house in long, somber sighs. For the first time since arriving in Dusty Creek, Clara felt the thin line between hope and danger sharpen. But beneath it all, something within her remained steady. A quiet courage, a deep-rooted resolve. She would face whatever came. Not alone, not anymore. Night settled over Dusty Creek like a thick blanket, carrying the scent of cooling earth and distant sage. Clara Dawson stood near the parlor window, watching the darkness stretch across the fields. Elias Whitmore had left only minutes earlier, riding toward town to meet Sheriff Coleman. Yet the house already felt emptier without him. Behind her, Lily Whitmore slept in her room, her breathing soft and steady. Clara listened for it occasionally, letting that small sound reassure her as she drifted between worry and resolve. The house was dim. Only a single lamp glowed in the corner, casting a warm circle of light that did little to ease Clara's growing anxiety. Trouble had been circling the ranch for days, creeping closer each time. She felt it now like a pressure in the air. She wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders and took a slow breath. "Fear doesn't get to decide who we become," she whispered to herself, letting the words settle in her chest. A sudden creak echoed from outside. No, Clara froze. Her eyes moved toward the door. The porch boards groaned under the weight of someone approaching. She stepped back, her heart pounding. Her first instinct was to protect Lily. Clara moved silently down the hall to the child's room. Lily slept curled against her pillow, her small hands tucked beneath her cheek. Clara gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, then stood between the doorway and the sound coming from outside. Another step. A shadow moved past the window. Clara's voice steadied. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Then a low voice, rough and familiar from whispered warnings in town. "It's only me. Miss Dawson." Clara stiffened. "Jed Turner." She walked slowly back to the main room, keeping herself positioned where she could still hear Lily. "What do you want?" The door pushed open. Jed stepped into the glow of the lamplight. His hat cast a dark line across his brow, and his eyes gleamed with something restless. He smelled faintly of tobacco and dust, like someone who had wandered for days without a place to settle. "I didn't come to scare you," he said. "I needed to talk." Claire straightened her back. "Mr. Turner, it's late. Whatever you have to say can wait until morning." He shook his head. "Morning's a dangerous time for some folks. I ain't sure I'll still be around by then." Clara studied him. This was not a man acting on confidence. This was a man cornered by his own choices. "You tampered with the fence," she said quietly. Jed winced, as though the truth stung. "I did, but not the way you think." Clara remained silent, letting him speak at his own pace. "I wasn't trying to hurt the Whitmores," Jed said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I was trying to send a message to someone else. Someone who's been putting pressure on the ranchers around here." "Who?" Clara asked. Jed hesitated. "Marshall Price." Clara had heard the name only once, mentioned in passing by Martha Nolan, a land broker who had come through town months ago, looking to buy struggling properties and push families off their land if they refused. A man known for making threats sound like business deals. Jed's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Price told me to stir trouble here." Thought if Elias felt unsafe, he'd sell part of his ranch cheap. I didn't want to listen at first, but Price, he knows how to twist a man's arm without raising his voice. Clara felt her stomach tighten. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Elias is a good man," Jed said, "and I haven't been one. Not for a long time. But I can't keep doing Price's bidding." Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping it firm. "Then you must tell the sheriff. Tonight." Jed swallowed hard. "I'm afraid Price already knows I'm backing out." "Are you in danger?" Clara asked. Jed gave a humorless laugh. "Likely. But I'd rather face danger telling the truth than live quiet and ashamed." Before Clara could respond, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Jed stiffened. "I have to go. If Price's men find me here, they'll think Elias put me up to talking." Clara opened the door, and Jed slipped into the night. He paused only once. "You're a brave woman. Miss Dawson," he said. "Elias ain't the only one who sees it." Then he vanished into darkness. Clara closed the door and bolted it, her breath shaky. She stood for a moment, letting her heart beat slow before returning to Lily's room. The child slept unharmed, blissfully unaware of the danger weaving through the ranch. Clara sat beside her for a while, her hand resting lightly on the quilt. The room felt like a fragile sanctuary. She whispered a promise she didn't fully understand until the words left her lips. "I won't let this world hurt you." Minutes passed. Then the sound of hooves approached again, slower this time. Clara rose and moved back to the window. This horse carried a rider she recognized even in the dim light. Elias. She opened the door before he reached the porch. Relief washed over his face when he saw her. "You're safe," he breathed. "Yes," Clara said gently. "And Lily is too." Elias stepped inside, but Clara saw immediately that something troubled him. His shoulders were tight, his brow furrowed. "What happened?" she asked. Elias removed his hat and set it on the table. "Coleman says there's been signs of riders near the southern ridge. Not locals, outsiders. He thinks something bigger is stirring." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "Elias, Jed Turner was here." His eyes widened. "Here did he threaten you?" "No," Clara said softly. "He warned me. He said Marshall Price has been pressuring ranchers to sell. He confessed to cutting the fences and starting that fire, but he claims he did it under duress." Elias stared at her, then looked toward Lily's room. His face tightened with a new protectiveness Clara had seen growing in him day by day. "Clara," he said, voice low, "you should stay in my mother's old room tonight. I won't have you walking back alone with danger so near." Clara nodded. "I'll stay. For a moment." Silence filled the space between them, Then Elias spoke again, his voice low and steady. I'm going to fight for this land. Clara, I'm going to fight for the life Lily deserves. And he hesitated, I want you to be part of that life. Not because Lily loves you, not because I need help, but because you've brought something into this house I didn't think we'd ever feel again. Clara lifted her chin, her eyes steady on his. Hope Elias nodded. Yes. Clara felt warmth blooming slowly in her chest. Not the dizzy warmth of impulsive love. Something steadier, something earned. She touched his hand, letting her fingers rest there. Then we will face whatever comes, together. Elias exhaled as though a burden shifted. They moved through the house quietly, checking windows, securing doors. When the lamps dimmed, Clara settled into the guest room, lying awake for a while, listening to the faint creaks of the old home and the soft rustling of the prairie outside. At some point, exhaustion overtook her. She slept, and for the first time since arriving in Dusty Creek, she dreamed not of running, but of standing still, of holding fast, of belonging. The dawn ahead promised danger, but also possibility. And Clara Dawson knew she was no longer walking her path alone. Clara's story reminds us of something simple yet profound. No matter what age, the human heart can heal. Loss is inevitable, but we are not born to live alone. With just a little courage to open our hearts, a little faith placed in the right place, even wounds that seem to have turned into scars can bloom with flowers of hope. The older people who have experienced many changes understand that true love is not noisy. It is as quiet as footsteps on the step, but steady, helping us stand up, helping us see that we are still valuable and have much to give. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this humane journey. If you feel the story touches your heart, please, like Ma, share and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you more healing, warm, and profound stories. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.